To mark his retirement, I'm organizing a special trip to Spain with our parents starting today. I'll be using your platinum card for the expenses so we can make the most of this celebratory trip. I hope you understand the urgency because we need to leave soon. I'm a bit confused. Can you clarify what you meant by using my card? Could you explain a bit more about the trip? Sorry, I must leave now, but we can discuss the details when I return. Just one heads up, though. The card might not work. Apparently, my husband Daniel already took it to fund a vacation with our parents. I've tolerated a lot from Daniel, but this time he's crossed the line. When he's back, he's going to regret his decision. My name is Angela, and at 35, I've carved out a successful career at a major company after graduating from a prestigious university. Despite being young, I earn enough to support not just Daniel, who's currently unemployed, but potentially a child as well, though we haven't started a family yet. We've been married for 4 years and are considering having kids. Despite my stable job and good income, I'm not entirely satisfied with my life. The idea of having a child is still just that, an idea. Meanwhile, Daniel's unemployment is a stark reality. Tonight, I'm not hungry because I snacked earlier, but that's a minor issue compared to Daniel's job situation. He didn't attend a job interview today. Instead, he stayed home browsing job sites. Daniel left his last full-time job a year ago and has since only taken up temporary part-time positions, quitting each one after a short period. He's currently looking at both full-time and part-time jobs. I keep encouraging him to focus on securing a full-time job. I understand there's a right time for everything, but I wish he could find stable employment soon. There's a reason he can't be pushed too hard since he left his last job, but it's high time he settled into a steady role. Daniel had a tough fallout at his last job due to a disagreement over work policies. He initially stood his ground against his boss, backed by his colleagues. However, as tensions heightened, his coworkers shifted their allegiance back to the boss, leaving Daniel isolated. Feeling betrayed and unsupported, he found it increasingly difficult to continue at the company and ultimately resigned. Post-resignation, Daniel retreated into himself, spending most of his time alone in his room. After a couple of weeks, he began to re-engage with daily life, helping around the house. Despite making jokes about having plenty of time on his hands, his smiles didn't quite reach his eyes. It took another 3 weeks for Daniel to start job hunting again. He felt optimistic about interviews and was determined to make a fresh start. But the job search proved more challenging than anticipated. Despite his efforts and qualifications, rejections piled up, which he attributed to his contentious departure from his previous job. This left him feeling discouraged and questioning his worth. The cycle of rejection affected Daniel deeply, leading to a sense of defiance and hopelessness. One day, I came home to find shredded resumes all over the living room floor. It was clear his recent interview hadn't gone well. I approached the situation cautiously, suggesting he throw away the torn papers. Daniel then expressed a desire to stop job hunting altogether, questioning the point of it all since we could manage my salary alone. While some thrive as full-time homemakers, this wasn't what Daniel envisioned for himself. It seemed more like an escape from facing his job search challenges. Recognizing his struggle and the impact of his last job experience, I decided to give him space and support, hoping he would find his way. In the meantime, we needed to have a serious conversation about our future and his career plans, as the situation wasn't sustainable in the long term. I've always been dedicated to my work, so this extended break isn't just about idling away. It's meant to be a period of preparation for what comes next. It's reassuring to hear that you're focusing on the future. Living close to my in-laws, Daniel's mom Helen, and dad Peter has its dynamics. They started visiting more frequently after Daniel quit his job, likely concerned about him. When they heard he was gearing up for his next career move, they seemed visibly relieved, but the reality was quite different. "The beer's running low. Can you pick some up on your way home?" I asked one evening. "Again? You're drinking too much. Try to cut back a bit," I suggested gently. Fine, I won't ask again. I'll get it myself, Daniel responded somewhat tersely. Despite appearances, Daniel wasn't preparing for a new job. His days were mostly filled with TV and beer. I suspect he was embarrassed about his unemployment, and I chose not to disclose the full extent of it to his parents, to protect his feelings. After more than 4 months without any job-seeking activity, I felt it was time to address the elephant in the room. Daniel, maybe it's time to start looking for work again. You seem more settled now, I ventured. What? It's only been 7 months since my last job. You want me to work again after what happened? He replied, his tone mixed with disbelief and irritation. I just think the break has been quite long. Let's not drag this out, I pressed, only to be met with, stop nagging. You can't understand my feelings when your job is going well. I have my struggles, you know. Everyone faces work problems and relationship issues. Despite the tension, Daniel agreed to start job hunting, which felt like a step forward, though he walked out during our conversation, clearly upset by our exchange. When Daniel calmed down, I planned to apologize, hoping to ease the tension. His next update caught me off guard. I got a job because you pushed me, he said one day, a mix of reluctance and acknowledgement in his voice. That's great. Where? I asked. At a nearby supermarket, he replied, adding, so you'll need to learn and work hard, right? His response was dismissive. It's just part-time, no need to work too hard. Whether part-time or full-time, I believe any job is significant. But I held back further comment, deciding instead to see how this step might help him regain his footing. I'm home, Daniel announced one day, not long after. You're back early. How's the job going at the pub? I inquired, mixing up his actual workplace. I quit the supermarket job. A college student there was being bossy, always telling me where to put the boxes in storage. It felt like harassment, he explained, frustration evident. The student was likely just instructing him on the proper procedures, a common practice in any job setting, but Daniel's pattern of finding and quitting jobs continued unabated. It became clear that Daniel's challenges with maintaining employment were deeper than just finding the right job. It's been a year since our last serious discussion about work, and Daniel now tells me he's working part-time at a pub, an industry he's never tried before. He finds it fascinating and believes he might have discovered his true passion. Really? That's fantastic, I respond, though I can't help but worry about the financial aspect. But isn't the income from a part-time job in a restaurant somewhat limited? That's okay, Daniel assures me, his eyes alight with a new kind of determination. I'm currently apprenticing and aiming to become independent. I plan to own my place someday. That sounds like a solid plan, I reply, genuinely pleased to see him with a goal. Here, take this and treat yourself to something nice for once, I added, handing him some money to encourage his new venture. However, the reality behind Daniel's optimistic facade soon surfaces. Just 5 days after our conversation, he quits the pub job. Not only that, but he continues to deceive everyone, including his parents from whom he accepts money under pretenses. This revelation is a harsh blow, and I find myself grappling with disappointment and frustration towards my husband. Determined to address the issue more directly than before, I seize an opportunity one evening as he watches a movie. Hey, Daniel, let's talk, I say, reaching for the remote and pausing the movie. It's frustrating when you pause at the best part. What is it? Daniel complains, clearly annoyed. Daniel, you're 37 now, right? That's prime working age. Don't you think about the future, spending all day at home, drinking and just watching TV? The future? There are plenty of 37-year-olds not working. Many people enjoy life without a job, he retorts defensively. True, work isn't everything, but those people have something else they're dedicated to. Do you have something like that? Yeah, I know you're upset about me not working. I'll look for another part-time job, Daniel replies, his tone dismissive but with a hint of concession. Although Daniel seems set on only working part-time, considering his history of quitting jobs and the underlying challenges he faces, I've been cautious about pushing him too hard. But now it's clear that it's time for Daniel to find some stability. One day while I was at work, I received an unexpected text from Daniel. "Dad's retiring, so we're going to Spain to celebrate starting today. I'm borrowing your platinum card. We're going to enjoy ourselves on your credit card." Alarmed, I call him immediately. "What do you mean a trip? Just what I said. I don't understand. Just what I said, please explain." The implications of his actions are manifold. Celebrating Peter's retirement is fine, but Daniel should have discussed the trip with me before using and essentially taking my money and credit card without asking. The thought that he might have told his parents he paid for it himself, using my credit card no less, fuels my anger and sense of betrayal. This situation is a stark reminder that despite some steps forward, deeper issues still need to be addressed. Daniel's recent actions brought us to a notable moment in our ongoing struggles with responsibility and communication. As we discussed his upcoming trip to Spain, Daniel mentioned something that caught my attention. "You mentioned borrowing a credit card. Do you mean the one from our house?" "Yeah, why?" He replied nonchalantly. "I own a platinum credit card. Contrary to popular belief, it's not just for those with high incomes. Factors like credit history and stable income play a part, and it's quite possible to secure one in your 30s. Despite its high annual fee, I find value in the benefits and points it offers. However, that credit card was supposed to be in my wallet." "So, you took the credit card from home?" I pressed. "Yeah, so I'm counting on you for the payment," Daniel responded, a bit too cheerfully for the situation. His casual demeanor and readiness to depart made it clear he thought he had everything under control. But the truth was about to complicate his plans significantly. "What are you waiting for? We need to leave," he urged, eager to get moving. "Hold on," I interrupted. "The credit card you took won't work." "What? That can't be right. It's under Angela's name and it expires this month. It's close, but it shouldn't be an issue," he countered, disbelief creeping into his voice. "You're lying, Angela. You're lying to stop me from using the card, aren't you?" Daniel accused, his frustration mounting. "Yes, it does expire this month," I admitted. "That's why I've already received a new credit card. Sometimes when a new card is activated, the old one stops working. I've already started using the new card, so the one you took won't work." "Are you kidding me? You think I'm lying?" Daniel's voice was tinged with panic now. "If you don't believe me, I can send you the URL to the credit card website, or you can just try using the card. It would be funny to see you try to pay with a card that doesn't work." "This credit card really won't work?" he muttered, more to himself than to me. I could hear his parents calling him in the background, but he seemed too flustered to respond. What should I do? I told them I'd pay for everything except the round-trip travel. "Oh, they covered the flight?" "Yes, Dad felt bad about covering all the trip costs." Daniel explained, a hint of relief in his voice. "What should I do? I'm about to take a cab and I don't even have money for that." "That's not my problem," I responded firmly. "You said you would pay for everything except the flight. Using my credit card in the first place was wrong. You should pay with your own money." "How can I? I don't have any money right now," Daniel exclaimed, the reality of his predicament sinking in. "Daniel, you haven't been taking work seriously," I concluded, the situation unfolding as a stark reminder of the broader issues at play. Daniel's reliance on deception rather than facing his responsibilities head-on led us to yet another crossroads. It all came to a head when Daniel tried to impress his parents by taking them on a trip without having any actual means to fund it. As I hung up the phone to return to my work, I left Daniel in a predicament where he would eventually need to confess to his parents about his financial deception. Later that evening, after my workday ended, I received a call from Helen, Daniel's mother. "I heard from Daniel. He tried to use your credit card and lied about working. I'm sorry for the trouble," she apologized. "No, don't apologize, Helen. I'm sorry for the inconvenience with the credit card. Are you okay with the money?" I asked, trying to smooth over the immediate concerns. "We'll cover the cost of this trip. When we return, I'll make sure Daniel apologizes and starts looking for a job immediately," Helen assured me, though her voice carried a hint of worry. "I appreciate that, Helen, but I'm considering divorcing Daniel," I confessed, letting the weight of my decision hang between us. Divorce? Because of this? Helen's surprise was evident, even though the phone. It's part of it, I admitted. Daniel has been taking money from me for a while. I stopped giving him money to limit his drinking. He got a part-time job and started buying his alcohol, but his salary couldn't cover his daily expenses. He's been taking money from my wallet to buy alcohol, sometimes just $10, sometimes $50. Over a year, it added up. When he took my credit card for this trip, it wasn't just about the money anymore. It made me realize he had no intention of changing. I understand. Should I inform Daniel about the divorce? Helen asked, her tone now somber. Could you just tell him I want a divorce? We'll discuss the rest when he gets home, I requested, hoping to manage the situation more personally once he returned. The next morning, Daniel called, likely having learned about the divorce from Helen, though I had asked her to wait. Feeling drained, I chose not to answer. That evening, when I returned home from work, I found Daniel had cut his trip short and was waiting for me in the living room. I'll start working seriously now. Please don't leave me, he pleaded, his apology seeming sincere. Seeing Daniel immediately apologize and display remorse was unexpected, but it came far too late. He had a whole year to change, yet here he was, asking for another chance now, after all my repeated warnings and the countless opportunities he wasted. I'm not going to give you another chance, Daniel. You gave up on me a long time ago. My decision is final. Can you leave? I said, standing firm in my resolve to move forward without him. The cycle of broken promises had to end, and with it, our path together. Please don't say that. If you won't leave, should I move out? Only if you can afford the rent here, I told Daniel, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Daniel fell silent. The harsh reality of his financial instability and the looming divorce weighed heavily on him. He had no money for next month's rent, let alone a steady income to depend on. As the realization set in, he seemed to shrink before my eyes. With no options left, Daniel quietly left the house. I watched him go. A part of me wanted to offer help for transportation, but I reminded myself that Daniel isn't a child. He needs to manage his affairs. It was a sad moment seeing him depart under such strained circumstances. Later, after Daniel had gone to his parents' house, Helen called me. They had let him stay for the night, but told him he must leave the next day. They were worried that if he stayed longer, it might encourage his dependence on them. As tough as it was for them, they believed it was necessary for Daniel's development. When Daniel returned to our house, desperation was clear in his voice. Please help me, I've got nowhere to go and no money, he pleaded. That's the result of your actions. You need to handle this yourself, I responded firmly. Over the past year, all Daniel had done was neglect his responsibilities and do as he pleased. It was painful but necessary to deny him entry, turning him away right at our doorstep. The divorce proceedings, though tense, were expedited with the support of his parents. I'm not entirely sure what became of Daniel afterward. He's likely still hopping from job to job, crafting excuses for his situation. I thought I would feel lonely without Daniel, but I didn't. His presence had been a constant source of stress, always walking on eggshells to avoid upsetting him. Now, freed from the need to accommodate his whims, I've been living more comfortably. Unknowingly, our life together had become a burden, one I hadn't fully recognized until he was gone. Relieved of that weight, I now find myself living a lighter, more authentic life, no longer tethered to the needs and failures of someone else.
Hi, I'm Vanessa, and my husband Billy is part of this story which I want to share with you. Before delving into the details, I want to share a rather unfortunate experience. My initial encounter with Billy's parents, Leroy and Cheyenne, turned out to be a disaster. Their disapproving words echo in my memory. They expressed their disbelief, asserting that Billy had chosen a loser in me. According to them, I lacked any positive attributes, merely holding a desk job in a small office. The prospect of me providing a good life seemed implausible to them. Billy, however, stood firm, professing, "I love Vanessa, and material wealth is inconsequential." His parents remained adamant, emphasizing their expectations regarding financial status. They made it clear that unless I met their criteria, I couldn't be their daughter-in-law, urging Billy to find someone else. Despite my astonishment, Billy declared his commitment to me and his intention to marry. The news of his planned proposal left me stunned. Though I had hoped for a future together, the timing took me by surprise. Yet beyond the personal revelation, what truly shocked me was Leroy and Cheyenne's troubling attitude toward our relationship. Billy had previously cautioned me about his parents, saying, "Vanessa, you have to understand, they aren't admirable people. Your expectations of them are overly optimistic." I was taken aback by the intensity of their disapproval. Challenging Billy's characterization of his parents, I defended them as hard-working individuals who must have faced difficulties in raising him. However, his warning now seemed prophetic, as I grappled with the alarming reality of their opposition to our union. "Vanessa," Billy continued, "you must comprehend the reality of my parents. While they did contribute to putting me through college, it wasn't purely out of a sense of support. It was driven by their greed. Their long-standing desire for me to marry into wealth was rooted in the expectation that my wife's financial resources would secure a comfortable life for them. As a naive individual, I was initially oblivious to the extent of their cruelty and selfishness," he concluded. In stark contrast, my parents were genuinely wonderful people, a fact even Billy acknowledged. Despite financially assisting his parents, Billy maintained a distant relationship with them, harboring a deep-seated disdain for reasons unknown. Despite this, he never completely severed ties, as his parents constantly guilted him about the sacrifices they claimed to have made. The day I met his parents was an eye-opener. Despite the protests of my future in-laws, Billy went ahead with proposing to me, and we got married. Despite their threats to boycott the wedding, they reluctantly attended. Billy had to plead with them to come, given his limited family connections. He convinced them, "Vanessa isn't a destitute orphan. Her father owns a house and some property." Their approval was only secured when Billy highlighted this. However, their motives remained transparent. At the wedding, they made it clear that they still disapproved of our marriage, expressing disappointment that Billy hadn't married into wealth. "We wouldn't have attended if we believed Vanessa had nothing," they said, insinuating that my father's possessions were the only saving grace for them to grace the occasion. Today, on my wedding day, I want to make it clear that my father is healthy, so there's no reason for inheritance to come up. This day is about my marriage, and I hope you'll remember the kindness you've shown by being here when any future conversations about a house inheritance arise," I replied angrily upon hearing my in-laws' hurtful remarks. Then I stepped away from them. My father was the sole living family member in my life, and the comments on my wedding day were profoundly disheartening. The audacity of Leroy and Cheyenne, demanding a share of my money, left me incredulous. Despite the turmoil, I chose not to burden Billy with the details, not wanting to spoil his special day. Additionally, I understood the difficulty he faced in cutting off his parents. Regrettably, our situation took a nosedive from that point onward. While Billy and I were consistently happy together, his parents incessantly intruded into our financial affairs. Leroy and Cheyenne persistently probed us about my father's net worth, and their behavior reeked of embarrassment and entitlement. Refusing to disclose the information did not deter them, and for several years, we tolerated their intrusive ways due to Billy's desire to maintain some relationship with them. Despite our attempts to resist, Billy's parents managed to drain our savings with their insatiable demands for money, accompanied by various excuses and guilt-tripping tactics. Their relentless comments about me and my inheritance became a constant nuisance. I chose to ignore them, but the situation hit rock bottom when my father was diagnosed with aggressive cancer and his time was limited. Living far away, we flew to visit him multiple times, a decision that never pleased Leroy and Cheyenne. They criticized us, saying, "Spending money on visits is wasteful, especially with your father in hospice care. It's pointless." Their callous remarks insinuated that the impending loss of my father justified saving money instead of being by his side. I vehemently disagreed, asserting, visiting my dying father is not a financial waste, and decisions about our money are entirely our prerogative. You have no authority to dictate that we should consider you our in-laws and heed your opinions. It is for your well-being, as we believe that investing in individuals with a longer life expectancy would be more prudent, they had the audacity to say. I was infuriated by their remarks, especially given my father's deteriorating health, which was causing me immense distress. Those who have experienced the loss of a parent would understand the emotional turmoil I was enduring during this challenging period. Contrary to providing support, my parents-in-laws exhibited a lack of understanding. They subtly discouraged me from visiting my ailing father and implied that allocating funds to them would be more appropriate. Fortunately, Billy intervened and put an end to their inappropriate conversation. Nonetheless, this incident fueled my determination to teach them a lesson when I was in a more stable state of mind. Unfortunately, my father passed away around 4 months after his diagnosis, leaving me devastated. Witnessing his declining health was agonizing, and though I recognized the inevitability, the loss was difficult to accept. Billy became my pillar of strength throughout this ordeal, accompanying me to my father's town to arrange the funeral. During this challenging time, my mother-in-law and father-in-law bombarded me with questions about my inheritance. They also inquired about the funeral expenses, displaying a complete lack of empathy. Despite our disgust, Billy and I chose not to confront them, agreeing that they would face consequences upon our return home. As expected, Leroy and Cheyenne wasted no time and confronted us immediately upon our return. Their intrusive questions about the inheritance and assumptions about the house were met with my disbelief and Billy's frustration. I couldn't fathom their insensitivity, especially after returning from my father's funeral. Vanessa, please refrain from acting so petulantly. Since Billy married you, there's been a lingering question among us. Why did he do it? Your job isn't noteworthy, and your appearance isn't particularly striking. Me and Leroy can't help but speculate. Perhaps it's all about the money, Cheyenne remarked coldly. Mom, what's gotten into you? How can you insult me and my wife like that? We married out of love, as I've repeatedly emphasized. At least have the decency not to bring this up today, Billy snapped, clearly appalled by his mother's words. Billy, there's no need for such drama. We're simply posing a question to your wife. She can answer, and we can satisfy our curiosity. We wouldn't mind if you married Vanessa for financial reasons. In fact, it would be delightful to know you secured such a grand prize, Leroy chimed in smugly. Accusing your son of being a gold digger? You two are truly dreadful parents. You're both out of your minds. I marvel at how a remarkable man like Billy could be born to such repulsive individuals, I retorted, barely containing my anger. Enough with the small talk, Vanessa. Tell us about your inheritance. This is the day I've been anticipating. Billy mentioned his father lived in a substantial house, and now you can reveal it. Buy us a house. We'll make good use of the money. After all, we're your parents now, Cheyenne demanded, her voice dripping with greed. Hearing this made my blood boil. I was seething with rage as Billy stared at his parents in disbelief. Even he couldn't fathom their greed and selfishness. It had been less than a month since my father passed away, and they were already planning to spend my inheritance on themselves. They even had the audacity to declare themselves my new parents. At that moment, I knew I had to take action. For years I had tolerated them for Billy's sake. Now, I wanted to reveal to my husband just how objectionable his parents truly were. Actually, my dad didn't have the house in his name when he passed away. I'm sorry to inform you, but he owned that house for a considerable time before he had to let it go for certain reasons, I explained calmly, watching their expressions. So, let me understand this correctly. You assert that your father no longer possessed ownership of his house? Leroy asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Contrary to that, as I previously mentioned, he did indeed own the house a substantial time ago. However, he recently had to part ways with it. Therefore, I did not inherit the house or any form of inheritance, as some might assume, I clarified, standing my ground. Oh dear, so your father was financially strained after all? I always suspected you lacked affluence. Your father couldn't even retain ownership of his house until the end. He passed away without a property under his name. You, as a wife, are only good for nothing." Cheyenne sneered, her words biting. "Our marriage isn't going to fall apart just because she didn't inherit anything. You can't end our relationship over such a trivial reason," Billy said firmly, stepping in to defend me. "Billy, don't interrupt," Leroy added angrily. "We won't allow you to continue this marriage. You've disappointed us by marrying into a less fortunate family. You never considered how you could keep your parents content. I'm ashamed to have a son like you," he concluded, his voice filled with disdain. He then turned to me. "Vanessa, I'm certain you've ensnared my son into marrying you. People like you employ underhanded tactics to attract men. Your ultimate plan was to cut us off and enjoy my son's wealth alone. Well, Vanessa, I won't allow that to happen." Leroy and Cheyenne incessantly pressured Billy to divorce me and leave. They insisted that he marry a wealthy girl so that my in-laws could relish the luxurious life they always desired. Billy, infuriated, started breaking down. I recognized the urgency to help him make a decision. I confronted Billy, inquiring if he was willing to permit his parents to manipulate our lives in such a manner. I had silently endured their money-centric behavior, refraining from voicing my concerns because he harbored guilt about severing financial ties with them. I probed whether he intended to persist in including them in our lives. Billy conveyed his frustration, affirming that he had reached his limit. He recognized his parents' true nature and how they had exploited him over the years to fulfill their aspirations. He concluded that he could no longer tolerate their behavior. Despite Billy's resistance, his parents persisted in asserting that divorcing me was in his best interest. They contended that they hadn't invested in him for him to extend charity to someone else. They pressured him to embark on a fresh start, urging him to seek a wealthy wife, and assured him of their support in this endeavor. They emphasized that he had already made too many mistakes on his own. "I will not abandon my wife simply because she did not receive an inheritance," my husband declared firmly. "I refuse to be manipulated any longer. I've decided to stay with Vanessa. Both of you are no longer welcome in my life," he added firmly. Billy's father responded sharply. "Why are you holding on to Vanessa? This is not what we had envisioned. She is entirely unsuitable for you. If you choose to remain in this marriage, we want nothing to do with you. We won't support you when she potentially robs you and leaves you in financial ruin. Your behavior towards your mother and me is simply terrible." I decided to disclose the truth to them, anticipating that revealing my true net worth would make them beg and plead, so I went all out. I assured them that I didn't need to exploit Billy or take his money, as I had more than enough resources on my own to take care of him without their assistance. "You, Vanessa, don't need to lie to make yourselves appear better. We know the truth, that you come from a modest background, and your job doesn't generate substantial income. Soon, you'll likely target Billy's wealth once you're in dire straits," my mother-in-law concluded. "Contrary to your assumptions, I am not a pauper's daughter. I have $80 million in my bank account, not earned through my job, but inherited from my father," I retorted. "Don't attempt to deceive us. Your father had nothing in his name, as you stated. Your lies won't work on us. We'll ensure you divorce our son and leave him alone," my father-in-law added. Billy, sensing the tension, interrupted his parents' disbelief. "Despite your anger, I'll tell you what's true. My wife has her own wealth. We don't need your judgments," Leroy scoffed. "Where did this sudden influx of money come from? You previously claimed you didn't receive an inheritance, even stating that your father didn't own his house until the end. How is this possible?" he asked. "What you didn't know was that my father owned a significant ranch where he resided. He sold both the ranch and the house before his passing, providing me with an early inheritance before entering hospice. He didn't want me to use my own money for his care, unlike your perspective," I explained. My parents-in-laws were stunned. Seeking confirmation from Billy, they fell silent for a moment, exchanged glances, and then dramatically changed their stance. Suddenly, they expressed joy, relieved that my father had left me well off. Billy's father softened his tone. "We misjudged the situation. Now, considering the financial aspect settled, "There's no reason for you to leave Billy," he uttered, and Cheyenne added, "We regret our initial skepticism, Vanessa. We really do. We were just trying to look out for Billy." Having considered their mission accomplished, my in-laws stopped expressing their dissatisfaction and backtracked. Billy, however, wasn't ready to forgive. "Your audacity to demand financial support is beyond words," Billy lashed out. "You earlier insisted on our divorce, and now you're backtracking, trying to act like family?" he asked angrily. His parents, backtracking further, apologized for their assumptions. "We only thought that because you concealed the truth," Cheyenne said softly. Despite their apology, I remained resolute. "I categorically refuse any form of reconciliation," I stated. "You disrupted my mourning for my father, and the wounds caused by your actions are too deep to either forgive or forget. Enough time has passed, and given your disdainful attitude towards me, there is no reason to keep you both in our lives." Billy supported my decision. "Today I am prioritizing the protection of myself and my wife from your toxic influence," he declared. "Leave my house immediately. Any thought of returning after this month is out of the question. Financial support from me will also end," my husband added. Leroy and Cheyenne reacted with desperation. "Please don't sever ties," they implored. But Billy, unmoved by their pleas, went so far as to threaten to involve the police if they did not leave the premises immediately. They left, but bombarded Billy and me with calls and messages. I, emotionally drained, blocked their numbers, while Billy issued warnings of legal consequences if their harassment persisted. In the ensuing days, Billy took charge of dealing with his estranged family, allowing me the space to properly mourn my father. Reflecting on my memories, I realized the profound kindness of my father. "He sold his property to spare me the burden," I said. "He used the proceeds to cover hospice expenses. He was a testament to selflessness." Billy, while liberated from his toxic family, still grappled with grief. "People think I abandoned them," he said, "but when they know the full story, they'll understand. I had to do what was best for us." Despite our efforts to sever contact, my in-laws continued their pursuit. Billy and me considered obtaining restraining orders. Amidst the chaos, I found a silver lining. I recently discovered that I'm pregnant. Despite the sadness of my father not being a part of our child's life, we'll find joy in preparing for our little one.